来，我们掌声欢迎 Mr. Icon。
你好. It is my honor to speak before you and to be invited here to share some thoughts on data, data management, and data professionalism. I come before you as the president of an organization called Data International. For the last 50 years, there have been a group of people dedicated to helping everybody with the data problem. And I think every speaker this morning has mentioned the data problem in a couple of different contexts. The idea behind Data International is to help data communities come together and solve some of the common problems and to attack some of the new problems. And we have, hopefully by this time next year, 17 chapters in China. This is an international organization with chapters all over the world in about 50 different countries. So we hope that you would be interested in talking to us a little bit about this as you go forward. Because of course, all of you understand that bad data plus anything awesome is going to lead to bad results. Now, I'm showing you a little clip here where we're looking at, 15 seconds, let me start over. A trade in the European Union must exist for at least half a second in order to be considered real. Half a second is a very low threshold, of course. But what you're seeing here on the screen is that half a second involved over 1,200 different transactions and 200 plus individual trades. This is a non-trivial problem as organizations are working into it. I'm going to go back a couple years and tell you that a managing director of one of the large banks came to me, called me on the telephone and said, "Hello, I have a problem." And the problem that he had was that every time they ran their trading system, they had to stop trading when they reached 10,000 errors. Now, that's not something that makes management very happy. In other words, you're saying to me, I must stop my operations, stop making money, stop making customers happy because we have incurred so many errors? And the answer was yes. So they had to change the way they were looking at this entire process. And the reason the managing director called me was because they had had several failed attempts already. So I had written a book early on in my career called Data Reverse Engineering, how to understand what the data is telling us and what the data structures are telling us in this. And I'm going to show you 5 slides that actually are worth about $500,000 in this. The existing system that they had was a big blob of code, and they had had many companies come in and try and help them with this. But the management had gotten very concerned that they were simply pouring money down the drain. So these 5 slides that I'm going to show you here were our explanation of the new approach, the approach that proved ultimately successful. It was that we were going to examine the existing system and its data, look at it as a series of components, and then understand each individual component. We can look at it from an input, process, output perspective, but we can also collect the data about how that system component is working. And then when we're ready to rebuild the system, we can enable communications modules with it. This would be a standard bus transformation or something along those lines that many of you are familiar with. What the beauty of this system was, though, this is the transformation system. If I want to take the red piece out, or the blue piece out, or the yellow piece out, or the green piece out, it doesn't require a big bang transformation. And in fact, if something doesn't work, such as the green piece, I can put it back into the system, and it will go back and forth without having to bet the entire farm on that big bang transformation. This, as I mentioned before, was a $500 million decision for the bank, and they eventually used this in a way that produced for them what they were looking for, which was their new architecture. The new architecture indicated, and more importantly, supported the strategy of the organization. So you can see from this diagram, it's a much simpler piece, and most importantly, it was designed around an error management system. Strategy is a key important consideration when you are preparing your data. What are you going to use the data for, and how am I going to use it well? There are several things that are happening here in China that are very, very exciting from an international perspective, and I'm here to learn as much as I am to help share some knowledge. One of the concepts that you're doing here in China that is not caught on elsewhere is the concept of a data bureau. This is the idea that you have government perspective one, government organization one, government organization two, and they have their own data in silos, and that's okay. But the goal of the data bureau is to look across all of these organizations and find out how else the organization, the government in this case, can use the data to more effectively support its goals and objective and the citizens of the country. We do not have this concept yet in our country, and it's something that we're working on very, very hard. So as I mentioned, I'm learning as well. We have a relatively new profession, this data profession. If some of you have never seen this individual, this is Ada Augusta King. She's the daughter of Lord Byron, and she made a very famous saying that turns out to be part of something that we now know as the hype cycle. Her saying was, in 1850, when I first encounter something new, we tend to think it's really, really good. And then on a second look, we think maybe it's not so good. And of course, the answer is somewhere in between, leading us to the famous hype cycle. Something starts off here with a technology trigger. It then goes to the peak of inflated expectations, then falls to the trough of disillusionment, and then eventually works its way onto the plateau of enlightenment where things actually start to work. And this is a standard learning process that most of us go through. Well, it turns out the same learning process goes into a little bit of history of data management. And one of the best places to look for these practices is a book on World War II and the Secret Service in, World War II, and the Secret Service in Britain, when they discovered there were suddenly 14 million persons of German descent living in the United Kingdom with a country they were at war with. So they decided that they needed to have, in this case, a 3x5 index card on each of these people, and then they went, how am I going to manage 14,000 different cards? It's the largest data management project that had been tried up till that point. And many of the techniques that we use in today's environment were invented during this time and used during this time. Now, something else that's happening here in China that is, again, very exciting from both the DAMA international perspective as well as my personal perspective is that President Xi has decreed that the data shall now show up on the balance sheet of organizations. In our country, this is explicitly prohibited. The accounting profession has said it is against GAAP to do this. We think that is an incorrect decision, and so we're looking to China to set leadership in this area in a way that's going to be something that we can all learn from. Because the question comes up, is well-organized data worth more? The answer, I hope, is yes, but if we have to convince somebody, we can look at something in the old days called a book. And we took a book. We don't just hand people things. We put the book in order. We put page numbers on the book. We put a table of contents in place. And we allow this book then to be more useful by incorporating metadata into it. However, if I just handed you the pages, had no page numbers on them, and the pages were out of order, this information would disappear very, very quickly. It would be very difficult. So once again, think of DAMA International as the group that is pulling together all of this into something we call the DAMA DMBOK, or the Data Management Body of Knowledge. And it was just translated into Chinese last year. When we look at this, there is still a problem with most typical organizational data. It falls into the category of ROT. ROT is an acronym that describes data that is redundant, obsolete, or trivial. And unfortunately, most organizations' data falls into that category and is never analyzed. So we have spent a lot of time working on things that are simply unproductive. The problem with this, and I will tell you that my full-time job is a university professor, and I'm going to complain about the universities here. So we have a picture here of an individual who's been taught to go out and learn how to play the piano. But his process for playing the piano involves throwing pink balls at a very large keyboard. Now, while this is interesting,
you know, anybody can play the piano with
it's
their
not
fingers.
very helpful if you want to hear quality music.
I learned to play with my balls. They were like, I hope that was a girl. All right, here we go. A tribute.
You get the picture. If his goal was entertainment, he succeeded very well. If his goal was quality music, not so much. And this is the challenge that we have in organizations. When we look over our data profession, we are interested in the data, but we're also interested in the class of individuals that can help prepare this data better and to try and address the data problem. Unfortunately, we're a relatively small group, and when we look at us compared to the knowledge worker workforce, we see a number of challenges that we're looking at. Here are some very good statistical numbers from a wonderful website called the Data Literacy Project. And the purpose of this is to show that you can't simply hand people a bunch of good data and expect them to do things with it. In fact, according to their measurements, several thousand professionals worldwide, most individuals will try to defer what they're doing. 49% of them will simply say, I'll find some other way to make this decision. And when it gets to the executive level, 2/3 of executives will find some other way of making the decision without data. I'm not sure what that actually means. In fact, if we go a little further, you can see on this last part, some individuals ignore the problem entirely. 14% of our workforce out there, when we ask them to make data decisions, doesn't do it. They avoid the problem entirely. Now, just from a productivity perspective, this is hugely important. When you look at what's actually happening in your data, your properly trained or properly prepared data sets should be cleaner, smaller, and more shareable than other types of data. But the challenge is, and this is a typical IT challenge, we want to put data in the cloud or train it for a model or whatever, and we do what is called forklifting the data. We take it and we stuff it in the cloud, but this ignores the fact that we are not trying to make the data more shareable, that we are not trying to make architectural decisions about it, that we are not trying to incorporate the strategy of the organization as part of that process. So this is the wrong way. What should we do? We should take that same data and use this as an opportunity to transform the data. As we move the data into the cloud or into our models, whatever it is, again, it should be of less volume because it's more shareable, and it certainly shouldn't be of less quality. So if we don't take steps we want to make sure it is of more quality. This gives us the opportunity to do what we call data branding, and you're seeing a lot of this now in the marketplace where people are saying, I don't want just any data, I want that data or that data, whatever it happens to be. Again, from our knowledge worker perspective, this is a posting that was on one of the jobs boards recently, and you can see here I'm fussing about it because it's a recent technology revelation. I'm pretty sure it's not recent to most of you. If you have bad data plus anything awesome, it's going to occur, and the insight here that the individual was describing was, this is true with the blockchain, and it's true without the blockchain. Well, this is not news to you, but it is news to most people, and we need to do more in order to do this. This is, of course, the process of garbage in, garbage out. I'll go back in time just a little bit and tell an AI story on this, because AI is a big popular piece. Many of you might have seen the movie The Imitation Game, where Alan Turing, who is credited with the development of artificial intelligence, started out and took a group of scientists together and said, I'm going to create a test. Now, the original purpose of artificial intelligence is to simulate intelligence, not to actually be intelligent. And we've seen in artificial intelligence these things we call AI winters. Notice it's following, again, the hype curve that I told you about just a minute ago, and we are right here in the hype curve of artificial intelligence at this point. When you ask a ChatGPT or something, what are the problems, what causes these AI winters, you'll notice there are 4 of them up there. I'm going to concentrate on just the data piece of it. For example, if we take machine learning, which is a very useful exercise in doing this, there are 2 types of machine learning. Supervised machine learning, which requires somebody to be oversighting the process, and unsupervised learning. There's another difference between them as well. One is much more expensive than the other. And of course, the cheaper ones are more common, which means we have less supervised learning of the machine learning techniques. Here's an example of one that's failed very badly. A group was trying to learn the difference between dogs and wolves. So they trained it with a bunch of pictures. Unfortunately, they didn't look to see what the difference was between these pictures. And when they went back and looked at what the machine was doing, it decided that all wolves have snow and no dogs have snow. Well, we know that's not a correct inference when we look at it from that perspective. Here is a sample from my iPhone of some of the things that Apple has done in machine learning on device. I asked the question in my Photos app, do I have any pictures of zebras? And it turns out that I do. Kind of interesting. Zebra's a kind of a tough one. It's a horse with stripes, but did a pretty accurate job of picking this. But I looked a little further at my iPhone and found out it also had a picture that was labeled zebra invasion. Now, I'm not sure that really represents a zebra invasion, but I can also tell you that the inference here is completely incorrect. Luckily, in this case, Apple stuff remains on device, and so I probably have not started the great zebra-human war of 2023. A couple of other points here. Everybody wants to do better data analysis, and some organizations look at data analysis and say, okay, I'd like my data analysts to be very productive. But we all know that data analysts spend 80% of their time working with the data problem. If we know this, why does it not focus on our budgets? Why are we not budgeting to put in place the data preparation, the data munging that we need to have in order to do this? It's really an Achilles heel in AI. The idea that there's something, we call it a fly in the ointment. I'm sure there's an equivalent Chinese transaction on this that describes it. It's from a book by Daniel Kahneman called Noise. And what he's saying here is that when you ask a group of experts what their opinion is on a particular topic, for example, in insurance industry, if they're rating a particular risk, these produce wide variance. And that is not possible to duplicate when you're trying to do the rest of your pieces. Another book in this area on bias is his same book, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. There's several ethical concerns. We had a system back during COVID that if you presented with pneumonia and COVID, it would say that was a good outcome. People said, what on earth does that mean? Well, it was a good outcome because the machine didn't know that when you presented at an emergency department with those two symptoms, it would take you immediately to an intensive care unit and you would receive different care. Another wonderful opportunity to take a look at this is a movie called Coded Bias, where they show a number of different flaws in this. We have a judicial system that actually gives incorrect data, but it's being used throughout the United States. Here is one additional example of this. This is a Tesla, and I don't pick on Tesla here, but it is an artificial intelligence piece. If you watch, the red car moves away from something that is a horse and buggy, and whoever created the Tesla software had no idea. Watch this right here where the truck is. It's a truck. Now the Tesla software goes the truck sideways. Now it's facing me. Now it's a pickup truck. Oh my goodness, it's coming right at me. How do I do this? What is going on? Well, of course, the category here where things went wrong is we didn't tell the artificial intelligence engineers that they should include a category of other, or more importantly, I don't know. And that should automatically trigger caution in our automatic cars driving software, but it doesn't exist at this point in time. So a final piece that we've looked at from our learnings in data management is that when somebody is going to invest something in a technology, there should be a much larger investment in the people and process challenges around this. So if somebody comes to me with $1 million and says, I want to make an investment, I say, I want $4 million to help my people and process understand what's actually happening here. Because we're a little bit afraid these days that our jobs will be taken over by AI. And I like to tell people, don't worry, your job won't be taken by AI. Your job will be taken by somebody who knows how to use AI better than you do. And that's a real important piece. So I leave you with just the hope symbol here, opportunity and chaos. And I think this is really the situation that we are all facing here. But there are wonderful things happening here, and I'm looking forward to learning more as I spend time with all of you. Xie xie.
Thank you, Mr. Icon. 非常感谢，谢谢